Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high achieving Latina and women of color founders who are ready to be seen, respected, and paid for the woman and leader you've become. Here on the podcast, we talk all things visibility, leadership, business, and identity, and what it really looks like to build success that still fits your life. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award-winning leadership and visibility coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal. I'm officially at the age and stage of my mid-30s where attending networking events past 6 p.m. at night is such a hard no, especially if there is drive time involved. Here in San Antonio, it is a very large city and it could take up to 30 minutes to 45 minutes, even sometimes an hour to get to one side of the city to the other side if you are driving in peak traffic hours. And so there are a lot of times where I just say no. If you invite me to something that starts at 7 o'clock at night, or maybe that's 30 or 40 minutes away from my house, and I know I'm not getting home until about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, baby, I'm here to tell you that I'm probably not attending. And apparently, that is a little controversial because when I shared this concept on Threads, people started pointing out very reasonably that there are a lot of professionals who work during the day. They can't just go have coffee or go to breakfast or a luncheon on a Tuesday morning or a Tuesday afternoon. They can't necessarily go to a networking lunch. And sometimes evening events are the only option. And you know what? They're right. And I completely respect that. The conversation that I want to have today is more about what happens when the way you learn to be visible stops fitting the life you are actually living. I think a lot of established business women are quietly experiencing this. If you've been in business for 5 years, 10 years, maybe even 15 years, you probably have done all of these things. You've built relationships and showing up at all of the conferences and mixers that you can find. You probably have joined all the memberships as well. Maybe you have drove or you've flown just to be visible in rooms that are going to help you build your business. But somewhere along the way, your life changed and your priorities have changed as well. Maybe your marriage duties have shifted, or you became a mother, or you're trying to become a mom. Maybe you're caregiving for a parent, or you yourself have been navigating health issues. And maybe you are rebuilding after burnout. Maybe you simply have reached a point where your definition of a good life no longer includes driving across town at 8:30 at night because somebody told you that proximity is power. Whew, that has probably been one of the bigger shifts in my own relationship to my own visibility as I have grown in my business and now hitting 11 years in business. I had built a huge portion of my business because of relationships and community building. A lot of the work that I do is referral based, and those conversations and networking and being willing to let people know who I am and what I do is a huge part of the success that I have built with my coaching business. And that has led me to the accolades and the clients that I have now. So I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and tell you that you don't need to network. You just need to post online or manifest the clients from your office. No, we're not here to say that because that's definitely not how I believe that business works. But I also had to confront something very uncomfortable over the last couple of years. I had built an idea of visibility that depended on me being available for almost everything. I didn't know how to say no. And I know that this is a common theme that I hear from my clients and also a common theme that I hear from other Latina businesswomen. We are so conditioned to always prioritize community and to prioritize being around the community and doing things for our community. And so when the question about are we going to show up for the community, we tend to always say yes, when in reality, that yes can really cost us. I think for me and my own visibility was I had to get really honest about what made it very hard to change my visibility habits. relevance? Was it a fear of irrelevance? I think I would think about being irrelevant because as you get older, there is a whole new generation that's coming online, that's coming into the fold. You almost have to keep up with the changing of algorithms and the changing of social media platforms and the way we network as well. And so I would always kind of think about my visibility as what if I stopped going and then people automatically were to forget about me and the work that I'm doing? I think a big thing was, what if an opportunity happens in a room that I decided and made a choice not to go to or walk into? When you have spent over 10 years building a reputation around being visible and being very well connected and being social, that fear can really run deep. I had built the social butterfly gal. And through that, my identity and my business were literally connected to being social. It's in the name, right? And throughout the many seasons of my life and my business, I had to confront what I thought my relevance depended on. I started to ask myself these questions to help me better understand my own relevance as I grew a little bit more older and also as my business grew. The first question I had to ask myself was, did my relevance depend on people physically seeing me almost every single day or almost every week? Did my business depend on me constantly proving that I was still active in the community? Did proximity only count if I drove somewhere and shook somebody's hand and gave my business card to somebody else? And then once I answered those questions, then I would flip it and I would ask, did I actually build enough authority, relationships, intellectual property, and trust so that I can begin being a little bit more selective with my time, my energy, and my money when it came to being visible? I feel like that's one of the biggest shifts that happens when you become a little bit more established. Early in business, I do believe that quantity of exposure can matter. You need people to know you exist, and therefore you do have to go to a lot of more events and be around a lot of people because a lot of people don't know you exist. And also you're having to understand how to reach more people on social media. And so getting people to know you exist in person is probably one of the biggest things that you could do in the beginning of your business. You do need to go to some things that you don't necessarily feel like going to. I know in my mid-20s, when I had first started my business, I think I was going to an event almost every single night and even doing a lot of weekend things and saying yes to a lot of things. I do believe that you probably need to stretch yourself a little bit more, but eventually your visibility has to mature with you. Otherwise, you're going to be using a year 1 or year 2 strategy when you're in year 10 or year 15. And then you're going to wonder why you are exhausted because you have a hard time saying no. I think when my own visibility started to compete with my life, there wasn't one dramatic moment where I woke up and said, okay, I'm never going to network at night or on the weekends again. I believe it was a little bit more ordinary than that. I would go to an event and I would leave later than I wanted to. My adrenaline would still be very, very high because I'm a very social person. And anytime that I'm around people, I would feed off of that energy. And so I would leave a networking event still super high on all of the conversations and all of the buzz that being around other people allows me to get. And so it would take me a while to come back down from that high. And I would walk through the door very close to like being 9:30 at night, which for me, that is basically my bedtime. I am usually in bed by 8 o'clock. Takes me a good solid hour to kind of wind down. And I'm usually in bed by 9:15. And that's because we go to bed early because we wake up very early. Pete wakes up at 4:30 every morning to work out. And I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to work out. And that's just how my body likes its rhythm. That's just something that I personally love doing, is having a really, really great morning routine. And I know when kids come into the picture, it's very different because you're kind of on the school schedule. But I do believe going to bed early at night sets me up for an incredible morning routine that I truly value. And so anytime I was going to a networking event at night, I was starting to notice that it was not just costing me the 3 hours that it would take to drive to the networking event, be at the networking event, and then come back. It was actually costing me part of my next day too. So I would get home feeling very overstimulated, and then I would go to sleep a little later because it takes me some time to continue to get back down. And then I would wake up more tired. So my workout might suffer because I'm a little bit more tired. Add in maybe having a glass of wine or two, then my energy would be off. And then suddenly that 2-hour networking event that I attended with the free food and maybe a free drink ended up costing me a 12-hour footprint of my life. And that really mattered. And I think that a lot of things changed for me when I really kind of stopped drinking because of my surgery and just, being in the trying to conceive era where I'm not really wanting to drink anymore. And I was really kind of noticing several of the networking events that prioritize, alcohol and all these socializing things. And then when you add in recovering from my surgery, which has been, close to 8 to 9 months. And I think I was really starting to think differently about my fertility and hormones. And just when you get older, you start recognizing that your energy that you had in the early days of your business, like if you started very young in your business, the energy that you had in your 20s is not going to be the same energy that you have in your mid 30s to early 40s. And that is because my priorities are now different. My body is super different. And I think my definition of success and responsibilities are also different as well. I don't think we talk enough about how a woman's hormones and their body functions and the different stages of a woman's life actually affect your business strategy. There's a lot of visibility advice built around an imaginary entrepreneur with unlimited energy. And when you really think about it, some of the content that we're inundated with on a day-to-day basis looks like this perfect and polished woman where she's, taking 5 calls back to back to back, and she's recording the podcast, and she's traveling, and she's got her laptop open, and she's looking so fucking busy, right? She's like driving to all the networking events and drinking all the cocktails and just, doing all the things, all while trying to take the kids to school and be this superhero woman that we constantly see all the time. And something that I really feel is that when you think about sustainability in your business and your visibility, it's going to require you to acknowledge that your strategy lives inside an actual human being life, which is your body is part of your business model. And your marriage is part of the reality your business has to exist inside of. So is the family responsibilities that you have as a mom or somebody who is taking care of aging parents. So much of the health aspect and the wellness aspect is part of that business strategy. And that doesn't mean every limitation becomes the excuse, but it does mean that your strategy has to deal inside of this reality. So for a long time, the question that I would always ask myself about attending a networking event or being more visible was, should I go? Should I go to this thing that starts at 6:00 at night and it's on the opposite side of town? Should I go to this event that I would have to travel to? Should I go to this event on the weekend where that is going to take me, a good portion of my Saturday? And those are the questions that I was asking. Should I? But now I ask different type of question. Now my question is this worth what it will actually cost me? And I'm not talking about actual cost, like it's $45 to attend the event. I'm not talking about the cost or even just the cost on gas. I'm talking about energy, drive time, recovery, preparation, being away from home, and what the next couple of hours in my day or night or the next morning will look like. All of that is a huge cost. Sometimes the event is absolutely worth the cost. If you think about the people that are going to be there and the opportunities that definitely could come out of it. But sometimes we're so conditioned to think that visibility is automatically valuable that we never calculate the actual return. we just say yes. And this is where I want to give you something practical that I've started to use in my own thinking and in my own frameworks when I'm trying to make a very aligned decision. There are 4 things I want you to consider when you are evaluating a visibility opportunity: capacity, proximity, return, and repetition. Let's go through these 4. So first is capacity. Do you actually have the capacity for this event right now? No, not could I technically make it work or fit this into my schedule? Because let's be real, we can technically make almost anything work. That's not the same question. Do you have the capacity? What does this require before, during, and after? What else is happening that week that it may or may not throw off? What season are you currently in life? Does your health need this? Does your family need this? What does your business model need right now? Capacity is information. And so I always evaluate my actual capacity. Then second, I look at proximity. What kind of proximity does this actually create? Because yes, proximity is power, but not all the time. When we think about proximity, a question to think about is proximity to whom? This is where I think a lot of visibility strategies get a little bit sloppy because we believe that we need to say yes to everything and we need to get into more rooms. Okay, but which rooms are we talking about? A room containing 200 people is not automatically more strategically valuable than a one-to-one coffee meeting with one person who deeply understands your work, your clientele, and is going to regularly refer clients to you. A conference with 1,000 attendees is not inherently better than being interviewed on a podcast whose listeners are exactly the people that you want to reach. Visibility isn't always about maximum exposure. It's about meaningful proximity to the right people and the right conversations and the right ideas. That's why my visibility mix looks a lot different now. I'm doing more of my own podcasts. We just started year 2, so thank you for being here. And I'm doing more guesting on other people's podcasts. I'm having a lot more one-to-one coffee meetings, and I'm spending more time creating conversations and being a part of actual conversations on LinkedIn and Threads. I'm doing less large-scale networking and fewer big conferences. I always would think that attending a huge conference would get me the visibility and get me in front of the people that needed to meet me. And of course, there was times where it did, but I do believe that going a little bit smaller is more beneficial to my time and my energy. And I'm also not trying to constantly feed Instagram because I'm afraid that something bad is going to happen if I stop posting for 48 to 72 hours. There have been a couple of times where I physically cannot show up or mentally I can't show up. And I just try to be as visible as I can through stories that are a little bit low lift or maybe in the DMs replying to people. But I now don't really think that, okay, if I don't post for a couple of days, like now my brand's going to be completely gone and nobody's going to recognize me. I do feel like I'm reallocating my energy a lot more when it comes to the proximity of being visible. The third thing is your return. So I always ask, what is the potential return? Return doesn't mean that it's always going to create immediate revenue for you. I think sometimes return is also relationship equity and better positioning when it comes to your brand. Sometimes it's meeting that one person who changes the trajectory of your business, referring you to your next client or your next collaborator or your next friend. Sometimes the return is simply joy. Joy counts, y'all. And you should always know when you're going to an event, why are you going? If you spend $300 on a ticket, and another 100 on dinner and transportation, you lose half a workday, you exhaust yourself, and you walk away thinking, well, at least I was visible. Okay, but was that strategically visible? Or were you just performing because you were afraid to not be seen? Those are definitely different things. And for established founders, especially, we need to become more disciplined about this because your time becomes increasingly valuable as your business matures. Not every room deserves access to you simply because you were invited. Then finally, can this strategy be repeated enough to compound? This one matters because sustainable visibility is not built around heroic bursts. It's truly built around things that you can keep doing time after time after time. If a visibility strategy requires you to override yourself every single time, how long are you realistically going to maintain it? Maybe one-on-one conversations drain you. Okay. This framework is not designed to make everybody choose the same visibility activity. It's designed to really help you build a visibility ecosystem that matches your energy and who you actually are. So that's why it's important to think what you can repeat for years is going to become the greatest asset. There's another layer here, especially for Latino women and women of color. Many of us were taught directly or indirectly that relationships require our presence. We got to show up for our people. We got to support our people. We got to attend all of the things. And there can be a lot of social pressure underneath that because sometimes saying no doesn't simply feel like declining an event. It feels like risking the relationship that you have built with that person or risking how someone perceives you. The most strategic thing you can do for your visibility is preserve the woman who has to sustain it. That's why my current personal rule is very simple. In this season, I prioritize early morning one-on-one coffee meetings, breakfasts, lunch networking events, or early evening events that are reasonably close to my home. So maybe I get invited to attend a networking event at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. I know that I can maybe stay there for about an hour and a half, and I will still be back home before my 6 p.m. rule. If something is outside those parameters, it needs to be compelling enough for me to intentionally make an exception. That's very different from automatically saying yes and figuring out the consequences later. And I know that my visibility and everything that I do now is going to change. And that's the point. Your visibility should evolve because you yourself as a person and your business is evolving as well. One of the biggest fears I had was that becoming less available would somehow make me less irrelevant. And that actually has not happened. My relationships are still intact, referrals still happen, and opportunities still find me. People are still reaching out. And perhaps most importantly, people are still saying my name in rooms that I'm not in. That last one really matters to me. So if you're feeling like you cannot keep up before you conclude and make a generalization that you are very inconsistent and lazy, I want you to look at your own visibility ecosystem. Take the things that you are doing right now, posting on Instagram, LinkedIn, maybe you have your own podcast, maybe you're speaking a lot on stages and you're traveling to speak. Maybe you're doing networking events or coffee meetings, whatever it is. I want you to run each one of these through those 4 questions. Do I have the capacity for this in my current season? Does this create the right proximity? What is the actual return? And can I repeat this long enough for it to compound over time? And then be honest with yourself. You may discover that something is taking an enormous amount of energy because you were told that it was important, not because it's actually important to you. You may also discover that you eliminated something under the language of protecting your peace that you actually need to reintroduce because your business needs more human connection. Both answers are useful. If you're listening to this and realize, I don't need to be everywhere anymore, but I do need to figure out where I should be, that's exactly the kind of work we can do together. You can learn more about my one-on-one coaching, such as a 90-minute intensive, a VIP day, or private coaching through the link in the show notes below. Because the goal is never to be visible everywhere. The goal is to build enough trust, authority, relationships, and reputation that your work keeps moving even when you are not physically in the room. If this episode resonated with you, here is how you can support the show and keep this conversation going. First, make sure you are subscribed to Unapologetically Visible on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube. And if you haven't already, please leave a review. Reviews help more Latina and women of color founders discover these conversations and find their way into our community. Second, share this episode with a woman who came to mind while you were listening, the ones who are navigating her own evolution, questioning what comes next, and are trying to figure out how to lead and be seen differently in their current season. And lastly, if today's conversation made you realize that you don't necessarily need more information and you need someone in your corner helping you think through decisions or leadership shifts in front of you, send me a DM on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal with the word coaching. I'll personally connect with you and help figure out which level of support makes the most sense for where you are right now. Thank you for listening, for sharing these episodes, and for continuing to make Unapologetically Visible part of your week. Remember this, being unapologetically visible isn't about being everywhere or being louder. It's about being willing to be seen for who you are now and who you are becoming. I'll see you next week.